Evening. The sun is already setting below the horizon when a man inserts a wheel into the groove. He barely repaired this cart and spent a lot of time on it. The girl asks what to cook for dinner. The guy pulls the cart. The guy says they need to hurry, otherwise the gentleman will get angry at them. They approach the road that the woman does not want to go, but the man has already made a decision. Covered in sweat and already tired, he objects that if they are late for the young master's first birthday, they will have big problems. They have no other choice, because this way will shorten the road by an hour, which means they will not receive punishment. They walk past broken carts, destroyed buildings, dead bodies of animals, and people with arrows sticking out of them. There is devastation around. The woman looks around anxiously. She is scared and anxiety is growing inside her every second. This is a real field of the dead. The man wonders when the victory over the Secneum will be won and peace will reign on earth again. The woman feels bad. She wants to leave this place as soon as possible, but he only agrees with this. Suddenly, they hear a baby crying. He is still quite a baby, who lies in the hands of an elf killed by an arrow. The child is crying. The man stops her, but Sarah wants to take him away. However, the man believes that it is better for the baby to leave this world now. The woman silently agrees. She obediently follows her husband, but abruptly turns around and returns to the child. The mother's heart does not allow her to leave the child to the mercy of fate. The man calls her by name, but she resolutely goes to the baby. Taking the child in her arms, she starts a poster herself because of everything that is happening. The man tries to reason with her so that she puts him back, because if they take him away, he will live like a slave and his life will be full of torment. The child will not have a childhood. From an early age he will have to come to terms with his fate. However, Sarah objects. Although she is a slave, she is still happy because he, Jiraz, is always with her. The baby in her arms has calmed down and is smiling happily. Touched by her words, he only says her name. 5 years later, a wooden house. A blonde-haired boy Nero sits at a table and shows 6 fingers when Jiraz asks him how old he is. Pregnant Sarah is lying on the bed in the corner of the room. She is covered with an old and darned blanket. The man pulls the fabric off the door in the floor. The woman exclaims, but Jiraz says that everything is fine. It's high time. With confidence in the correctness of his actions, he asks the boy to follow him. They go down to the basement, which is lit by only one candle. The boy looks at the room with his eyes wide open and his mouth open. This basement was built by Jiraz's great-great-great-grandfather. There are shelves against the walls. They are filled with books. The man asks with interest what slaves are forbidden to do. The boy talks about weapons and Jiraz adds that they are also not allowed to read books. Pulling out a blue-covered book, he asks Nero what the nobles are most afraid of. The boy hesitantly assumes that they are afraid of a disgusting smell. Jiraz frowns and says that they are afraid of changes that begin with weapons and books. The boy listens attentively to his father, who believes that even if the world is changing, the rulers themselves want to be at the head of these changes. He closes the book. Their ancestor realized long ago that time does not stand still, so when this happens, his descendants should be ready. It is thanks to this that this place appeared. Jiraz gives Nero the book. The man asks to keep this place a secret and prepare himself, because great changes are coming. The boy looks at the book with tension and uncertainty. Time passes. One afternoon, Sarah finds Jiraz lying dead on the ground among the plants, with a rake lying nearby. Nero is sitting in the basement reading a book when the door to it opens and 2 children inform him that something has happened to his father. A wooden plaque stands near the tree. Nero is sitting on his knees in front of her. Sarah is standing a little apart and hugging 2 children to her. Everyone is crying. They are all in old and patched clothes. A black-haired man with a beard puts a flower near the sign. In his opinion, Jiraz was very sick and refused medical help in vain, because he could have lived for a long time. Still clutching the children to her, Sarah exclaims with rage that it's all because of him, because they spent all the money on medicines that brought her husband to the grave. The man scratches his ear with his little finger and with the corners of his lips slightly raised, asks if she doubts that he can buy her at auction. All in tears, she angrily shouts that there was poison in the medicines he sold them. The man immediately puts his hand over her mouth and with an ominous face reminds her that she is just a slave and she should watch her tongue, otherwise she may incur problems. She pushes him away from her, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Her revenge will be accomplished, and she will never forgive him in her life. Crying children are watching everything that is happening. Angered by her actions and words, he swings at her. Nero wants to stop him, but his mother stops him with a wave of her hand. The man's fist stops a few centimeters from her face, and all because she is the property of the Regaz family and he knows the consequences if he hits her now. The man unclenches his fist and, turning around, he leaves, but with a malicious smile notices that she is now a slave who is not in the best condition, so no one needs her without her husband. Sarah and the children look after him angrily. A few days later, Sarah is walking with a rake in her hand when a man with his hair in a low ponytail and glasses calls out to her. He holds a bag of money in his hands and asks the woman to greet her new master, who is now the one who recently almost hit her. Sarah looks at him with fear. Nero restrains the crying children who want to run after the cart on which Sarah and her new master are leaving. The boy himself is holding up, and it is clear from his appearance that he is very unhappy with what is happening. A woman with tears in her eyes mentally asks him to be strong and protect his sisters, because now he is the oldest among them, which means he must do everything in his power. Time passes. Nero runs through the crowd of people, calling his mother. People make way for him and whisper to each other. They assume that this is her son and are right. He stops abruptly. The boy is shocked. Before his eyes is the body of the dead Sarah, who is sitting pressed against the wall. Her eyes are open. There is no life in them anymore. Shocked by what he saw, he stops dead in his tracks. His sisters run past him, but Nero manages to stop them and cover their tearful eyes with his palms. The girls try to remove his hands to look at his mother, to run to her, but the boy firmly holds them near him. The boy turns his gaze to Mom's new master, whom two knights are holding by the arms. He screams to be released, because she is just a slave, his property with which he can do anything. The man is not walking. He is hanging on the arms of the knights. He is taken to prison, where he will have to express his dissatisfaction. Crying, the men exclaim that she is not more expensive than a horse, and that now they are also jailed for killing a horse. Already at home, when the sisters, covered with a blanket, are sleeping, Nero cuts off the bark of a tree with a knife and remembers his father's words about what the nobles are most afraid of: changes in life. Having made an important decision for himself, he raises his sword with tears in his eyes. The boy is determined to radically change his life and protect his sisters from possible danger. Nero hones his sword strokes every day, swinging it in different directions. He trains in the basement. Tired, the young man throws the sword away from him and, leaning back against the shelf, takes off his t-shirt. The boy is breathing heavily and covered in sweat. He pays attention to his medallion, but his sister pulls him away from his thoughts, who says it's time for them to have lunch. In the evening, Nero is lying in his bed with his sisters, but he believes that the sisters should sleep in their beds, not with him. But Wendy has nightmares in which they are separated from her sister and given to different nobles. That's why Wendy and Sylvie are scared. They are afraid to be alone. Nero promises that he will do everything possible to keep them together forever, that they will become commoners. But for this to happen, they have only three options. Firstly, they can pay a lot of money to the country. Thus, their life will cease to belong to someone. But they have no money. The second option obliges them to fight in wars to become national heroes, but such an outcome is unlikely, because slaves cannot take up arms. The third option is the Excanum Academy, which can allow him to rise from his knees and stop being a slave. And this option seems to him the most successful, because the current emperor was once a slave, and he was a graduate of this academy. 1 year later, the sound of hooves. Murin, the ruler of the empire, arrived in the family where Nero was a slave. A blond man with a red cloak and a sword on his back, sitting on a horse, he greets Lord Logan. However, the Lord's family did not expect his visit. The ruler explains his arrival by saying that he has a meeting scheduled for tomorrow with the ambassador of Eruka, as well as Kundan's father and his father too, so first he wants to meet with him, and only then he will go to the meeting. The Lord is honored by such attention from His Majesty. Next to the Lord is Evan, the son of Kundan. Next year he enters the academy and intends to become a magician like his father. The ruler promises the boy that they will definitely talk. They have something to exchange a few words about. Yet he was once a graduate of this academy. Lord Logan orders to gather all the slaves and prepare a place to eat. But the ruler refuses. He wants to look at the place where Kundan grew up, and also talk about preparing for exams in the Excanum with a future student. The ruler pats the boy on the head in a fatherly gesture. Evan smiles sweetly at this action, opening his palm and pointing towards the garden. He asks permission to escort the ruler to his father's favorite place. Murin agrees to the offer with a smile. At this time, a gloomy Nero is watching them from around the corner. A plan has already appeared in his head that will help him realize his dream. The sun illuminates a tree with a small house on the branches. This is the place where Kundan grew up, because he preferred quiet nature to a noisy city. The ruler agrees with this. Even the boy's father often said that magic is connected with nature, and unity with it is the key to true mastery. Murin looks closely at Evan when he says that he wants to become a magician like his father, to be more precise, a black magician. The ruler is surprised that the boy has talent in this area. The boy shows what he can do and indicates that he has not had any training yet. The gate of the bull pen opens. The man and Evan tense up when they hear strange sounds. Animals are caught at the moment when a descendant of Kundan says that in his spare time from lessons, he came here, enjoyed nature. The boy does not have time to finish when the guards, blocking the way of the animals, ask the ruler to leave, because it becomes unsafe here. A herd of bulls is rushing towards them. With eyes burning with purple light, they throw guards into the air and break their swords. Evan tries to attack them with magic, but it does not bring much success. He manages to stop only one bull. Then the ruler stands in front of him, thereby blocking him with his back from danger and asks him to hurry to hide before he gets hurt. He puts his hand behind his back to get the sword out of its scabbard. It is already sparkling with current. Not having time to pull out the sword, Nero abruptly appears in front of them with his arms wide apart. His eyes burn with the same color as the bull's eyes. He looks at them attentively, and the animals stop. Behind Nero's back, Evan is surprised by the presence of this stink. Murin, frowning, feels something is wrong, but he does not remove his hand from the sword. Nero is breathing heavily, sweat is streaming down his face, and his eyes glow with a violet lilac light. The boy remembers how his father told him that he was not their son. His real father was an elf who had died a long time ago, and there was a pendant in Nero's hand, because he had incredible powers only because he was a half-breed elf who always communicated well with animals. Still standing behind Nero, Murin asks him if he uses his abilities to communicate with them. The question takes the boy by surprise. He freezes in place. Suddenly, another bull rushes at them with furious force. Nero snatches the sword from the knight lying on the ground. A wave of metal and both lie on the ground. The bull is defeated. The ruler looks at it in silence. Evan stands with his mouth open. He does not know how to react to the trick of this slave. Nero exhales heavily when Murin, looking down at him, asks him again if he used magic or knows how to communicate with animals. The boy immediately falls to his knees in front of him and almost trembles, looking at the man from under his brows, trying to convince him of the favor of animals because he feeds them, which means they completely obey him and no one else. Still frowning, confident in something of his own, Murin asks him what he wants as a reward for saving the emperor. Nero's eyes widen. This is his chance, and he won't miss it. Out of the blue, the boy asks to be allowed to enter the Excanum Academy. The knights around are surprised. Evan at first thinks he misheard, but after the boy exclaims that this non-entity Nero is just a slave, how can he be accepted into the academy? The knights wonder why the slave has a weapon in his hands. Evan warns Murin about the unpleasant smell coming from this slave. Without listening to anyone, the emperor gets down on one knee so that no one hears their conversation. The blonde hair barely touches the boy's head. Nero is trembling from the possible disclosure of his plan that he is a half-blood elf and everything that happened was his doing. The emperor says that the boy impressed him by showing his ability, the ability to communicate with animals. But this does not negate the fact that he himself set up this whole situation with the bulls. He himself opened the pen and forced them to attack the emperor. Standing with his back to Nero, Murin informs him over his shoulder that a slave holding a weapon becomes a criminal. But since this slave saved him, he will escape death. But he will be sent to the Akali mine instead of the academy. He will work there for the rest of his life to make amends. Nero is amazed by what he has heard. His whole plan has collapsed like a house of cards. The crescent moon illuminates the dark forest and criminals who are escorted by 4 guards. Their arms and chests are tied with a rope that binds each subsequent prisoner. Nero goes darker than a cloud. They all look exhausted and tired, as if they haven't slept or rested for several days. One of the prisoners asks when they are coming and why they are taking so long. He wants to go home. To which another prisoner with a scar on his eyebrow and lip tells him to surrender, because they have already gone very far and no one will save them. The same prisoner is interested in why everyone is preparing for death, and is this place really so scary? The place where they go is the magic ore mine in Azebaum. Ore is one of the ingredients for creating powerful weapons. It was thanks to him that they won the last battle. But the danger lies not in the ore itself, but in the fact that it attracts all the monsters in the area. The sisters are now left alone. They are sitting on the bed in the corner, hugging their knees to themselves. One of them is crying and is afraid that because of their worthlessness, the owners will most likely sell them. The second one asks her not to say so. Everything will be fine. They just have to wait until their brother returns. And in the meantime, they will do the most ordinary things. For example, cooking or cleaning. Suddenly, the door of their house opens and an unpleasant-looking man comes in, who is dressed in red boots, a long red skirt, an orange cape and a blouse with ruffles at the neck. He looks more like some kind of scary and strange doll than a person. His blue eyes look lifeless, and his yellow hair looks more like a bad quality wig. A smile does not cause any trust, but only pushes away from himself. He wants to buy these cute twins in his opinion for 300 gold coins. Lord Regaz is not sure about the welfare of the girls if he sells them to him, yet there are not the most pleasant rumors about him. However, this man with the same unreadable face says that he will not believe that one of the greatest nobles believes the words of dirty peasants. The girls are nervous, tears are streaming down their cheeks, they are watching everything with their eyes wide open. The man does not give up and has already offered 450 gold pieces. The lord is still not sure. He offers the last price of 600 gold coins, with which you can buy a strong man. The lord remains adamant. The unpleasant-looking man leaves, but asks him to notify him if he changes his mind and still wants to sell them. The girls are happy that they were not sold and that the gentleman turned out to be much kinder than they thought. At this time, Nero and the other prisoners are still walking to the mine. Suddenly, with tears in his eyes, he shouts into the sky. He can't believe that a whole year of preparation has gone nowhere. The image of the sisters is before my eyes. The worst thing he could imagine happened, but he can't die. Otherwise no one will be able to take care of his sisters. His screams are stopped by a whip on his cheek. The criminal standing next to him silently looks at what happened. He was hit by one of the guards, who had already warned that he easily loses his temper. He demands not to scare him like that anymore. And several more times he hits the already fallen Nero on the back with a whip. The rest of the prisoners are afraid that they may also be hurt, so they take a step back. The boy tearfully begs for mercy. A growl is heard from the bushes and the guard would have continued to beat Nero, if not for a wild animal that unexpectedly attacked one of the prisoners, which jumped out of the same bushes. The predator, imbued with the aura of magical ore, with glowing green eyes, bites into the neck of the victim. The animal growls and opens its mouth wide. The one who beat Nero falls to the ground unconscious. The boy does not understand what it is, but on a subconscious level he is afraid of it and stretches in the opposite direction, away from the predator. A guard sitting on a horse pulls out a bow and arrows. They need to attack and destroy the predator. He hits it several times and the wounded animal runs away into the bushes. Having gathered a bunch of prisoners, they resume movement. They need to go faster if they want to reach the mine faster. Nero, with drops of tears in the corners of his eyes, looks at the dead body of a prisoner. He can't die here, just not in such a place. They leave the deceased on the ground. Most likely he will be eaten by either monsters or predators. Already at the mine, the caretaker, who looks quite manly, with a beard and in armor with a sword at the ready, he asks the guard why they came so late and why there are only 14 prisoners here, and not, as they were informed, 18. The man who brought them to the mine explains that he should have understood why a long time ago. After all, 3 died of hunger, and the last one was killed by an animal. You can see that he is a little tense, but he tries not to show it. The knight is dissatisfied with this. His face expresses pity and indignation at the same time. If they had more strength, they would have reached the mines at least in good condition. Because those who came here were in poor condition and absolutely useless and would most likely die in the near future. Each of the prisoners is useless at such work, and even more so with such exhaustion. And it's true that all the prisoners were exhausted, tortured and tired, but even in this state they have to work, so they take tools and get to work. They need to survive, because the caretaker is much scarier than any monsters in the area. While others are being untied and freed from their bonds, other prisoners are taking tools. However, one of them approaches the caretaker and asks permission to join the administration, and then he will thank him well, because he is an ordinary peasant and in view of some unfortunate circumstances, he was sent here completely unfairly. Without a word, the caretaker abruptly pulls the sword out of its scabbard and kills the prisoner. He feels neither regret nor remorse, as if this is how it should be. The guard looks at this with irony and slight fear, but other criminals are straining. The caretaker is furious at such an outburst. His face is distorted by a grimace of discontent, which only strengthens his furrowed eyebrows and angry, wide-open eyes. Now they should forget about what happened to them before. From today each of them is just a machine for mining ore. And if they can't accept this fact, then the caretaker will happily kill them or send them to be eaten by monsters. Knight, the prisoner with trembling hands hits the stones with a pickaxe and immediately falls to the ground. Barefoot, dirty and sweating, he causes nothing but pity. Nero looks at this with fear in his eyes. He is afraid that this could happen to him, and he cannot die and show weakness, otherwise there will be no one to protect his sisters. One of the observers in a bandana on his face suggests to the prisoner to chop off his hands and relieve him of pain, since he has not learned to hold a pickaxe in a week. He is already pulling out his sword when he hears an animal cry that resounds throughout the mine. It becomes clear that there is a monster here. The prisoners are given swords and get ready for battle. But they have never held a weapon in their hands and look confused with swords in their hands. They are more like those who need to be protected, not those who can do it. However, the guard doesn't care about it. They need to fight if they want to survive. Nero watches everything with wide open eyes. Suddenly they see how the caretaker is thrown back by a green monster, but he does not allow himself to fall on his back. He lands on his feet and helps himself to keep his balance with his hand. The monster's body is more like a human, strong arms and steel muscles, and in the hands of an axe. However, the sharp teeth like a shark's and the eyes burning with green light are most frightening. The caretaker and the guard are perplexed. They see something like this for the first time, and therefore do not know what to do with it. But they definitely have to destroy it so that the monster cannot harm them, the prisoners and other knights in the mine. A guard with a bandana turns to the prisoners who have already picked up swords, but do nothing because they do not know how to fight. He asks them to just distract the monster, but an axe is already flying in his direction, which crashes into his body and he falls dead to the ground. The caretaker silently watches everything that happens, but does nothing, as if it has shaken him to the depths of his soul, as if he had never seen death with his own eyes before. As if waking up from a dream, he runs with the prisoner. The caretaker is tense and asks the prisoners for the last time if none of them are really capable of fighting. He understands that Samuel is not here now, and the Empire will not support them in killing one monster. The prisoners are crying, they are afraid of death, but they continue to hold swords in their hands. They understand that, perhaps, these are their last seconds of their lives, but they will not be able to protect themselves. The monster swings the axe again and now wants to kill the caretaker, as his hand, along with the weapon, flies away. It was Nero who decisively chopped off the monster's arm. Now all the anger of the monster is directed specifically to the boy. With his mouth wide open, he growls at him, but Nero is not afraid of this. He will not die in this mine, definitely not by the hand of this monster. A swing of the sword and the blade enters the green body like clockwork, and the big man lies prostrate on the ground. The prisoners rejoice in the victory and let them survive today thanks to the boy. No one knows what awaits them tomorrow. The caretaker, along with other guards, asks Nero his name and where he learned to handle a sword like that. The boy admits that it is because he knows how to use weapons that he was sent here. The caretaker praises Nero, who joins the guard from tomorrow. Arms folded, the caretaker and another knight explain to Nero the current state of affairs and what he will need to do in case of an alarm. Now Nero will work as a security guard only from lunch to dinner, and in his free time he goes to the mine again. When monsters appear, he immediately deals with them. A boy with burning eyes and in a guard uniform, saluting the knights, thanks the caretaker and promises to do everything in his power. He will kill all monsters that show aggression. The caretaker besieges him that he shouldn't invent who knows what, because last time he was lucky, because the monster was distracted by him, and Nero still has to learn the basics of communicating with the sword. One of the knights is interested in the fact that their army can relax because of this and forget about surveillance and their direct duties to protect the mine from monsters and beasts. The army is already lazy. Let them at least look at the training instead of loitering around. They drink something hotter than their wooden mugs and meanwhile discuss the training of a 13-year-old boy and an elite knight. It is difficult for the second knight to believe that a slave practiced such an occupation. And if Nero had a personal mentor, his skills would have increased significantly. The caretaker assigns an elite black knight to Nero Samuel, who will teach him how to handle a sword correctly. The caretaker and another guard are watching the training of the boy with the knight, and are surprised at the talent of the boy, who learns quickly, and if he were not a slave, he could enter an elite academy. It's a pity, because only death awaits the boy here. Nero is actively training, but his kick is still weak, as the knight informs him. Nero is doing everything in his power to increase his skills and muscles. He is working hard in the mine. The knight asks Nero to take off his shirt to see how hard the boy pumped his muscles. There is progress, but do not relax. Samuel gives advice not to restrain your strength at work. A monster is watching people. He is hiding in the mountains. Another day in the mine. Sounds of work are heard. 13-year-old Nero's smile irritates the other prisoners. They tell him that they are doing it for him, that he eats better and generally thinks that he is above them. If he doesn't stop smiling, they'll kill him on the spot. After all, every guard can die from a monster, which means that someone else can replace him. Nero listens to all this without a smile and with a little surprise. But then the three dissatisfied are interrupted by a guard who shouts them back to work. They quickly agree and leave. With his hands down, Nero approaches his seat. His fists are clenched. He doesn't understand why they told him that. The grandfather standing next to them calls them ungrateful scum, because they are alive only thanks to him. That's human nature. Hatred for everyone who lives a better life permeates them through and through. They are just afraid that there is someone stronger, but they try not to show it, not realizing that in the end everyone is waiting for the same fate. Nero listens attentively to his grandfather, but does not have time to answer anything. A warning signal is heard, an urgent message that everyone needs to get ready for battle. The boy immediately tenses up and, hearing the order, throws the pickaxe and, wearing a guard's uniform, runs to the exit of the mine. There are signs of a battle all around. Dead bodies of people lie on all surfaces. At the entrance to the mine, a caretaker is sitting on his knees. In front of him is a huge monster. He looks like a man, only his arms are too long, and they are short, while his neck is unnaturally long. His weapons are all in the blood of innocent victims. Several smaller monsters, each with a weapon in his hand. Monsters better give up. Reinforcements are on the way and they will die soon. There is rage on the caretaker's face. He shouts for the empire. The biggest monster with a long neck reports that now not only people have an empire. The knight is amazed. He does not believe what he has heard. Without getting up from his knees, he loses his head. Nero is in shock, with a sword lowered to the ground in his right hand, and his left hand is clenched into a fist. Samuel appears in front of him. The monster gives the order to seize the mine. He is already wounded and asks Nero not to approach. Such an enemy is too tough for him now. He needs to carefully observe how the sword shines over the heads of opponents. Waving his sword, he runs forward, moving his hand from right to left, and already several of the monster's henchmen have been destroyed. He kills them one by one. His eyes are burning with anger and rage. Samuel is determined. Here he is already near the most important thing, when the monster's sword cuts him in half. Tears appear in Nero's eyes. The boy is tense. The monster gives the order to devour all the people they find. One of the henchmen steps on the hand of an already dead Dark Knight. Nero runs back to the caves, but when he sees the swords stacked in a pile, he stops. All prisoners are sitting on their knees with their heads bowed to the ground. The boy doesn't understand what they are doing. It turns out that they decided to give up and stay as slaves, because the monsters came for the mine, and they will give it up just like that, without a fight. They don't care who controls them, the only goal is to survive. Nero hears the monster laughing behind him. He thinks humans are interesting, but they don't need slaves, just food. Nero kills everyone who runs to the hostages to kill them and then eat them. However, the most important one pins it on his sword and, holding it up, notes that it is good for a child. Nero coughs up blood. He trained to protect people. The monster admits that it looks much more attractive than the rest of the garbage, and the young meat is very tasty, so it's time to eat it. But this is not allowed to happen. The flow of powerful energy destroys all his flesh, leaving only bones. It was the emperor who moved with his army using a teleportation artifact. Nero tells the dying Nero that he is a hero who protected his people. Behind him is an army of knights, ready to rush into battle immediately. The boy is flattered that the emperor remembers the slave's name and asks him to tell his sisters about what happened. A man heals Nero's wounds. Prisoners with swords in their hands exclaim that Nero did absolutely nothing. He just got in the way and hurt himself. They are the real defenders of the mine, but their swords are too clean for defenders. Like that monster, he kills almost everyone. The Imperator takes the boy in his arms and gives an order to the captain that after Nero is completely healed, he will be accepted into the Excanum Academy. The sun is shining on Nero's house. His younger sisters say goodbye to him. He promises to come back before Wendy and Sylvie grow up. And until that time, they will not melt the master. They will work hard like mom and dad and will be obedient. With joyful faces, they promise to do everything their brother tells them. Nero hugs them and promises that when he comes back, he will buy them back, but in the meantime he will study hard. Evan's 7 slaves are packing him up for the road. A cart with things is attached to the cart pulled by 2 horses, in which Nero is going to go. The knight accompanying the boy is unhappy with this fact. The emperor ordered to treat him with special care. Nero convinces the knight that everything is fine, that it's spring and it's not worth worrying about him so much, and it will be more convenient for him among things. The knight warns the cabman that it's flu season in the yard, so it's better for him to have enough food and medicine with him. The driver and his family will be in danger if, upon arrival at the academy, the boy falls ill. Evan is unhappy with the fact that the slave is going with him, but can't do anything about it. Subordinates lead the cart with praising shouts and hooting. Nero looks at the nature around him. He inhales the fragrance of flowering trees, clutching the sword that Murin handed him when he came to himself. The sword belonged to the caretaker Gigas, whose head was cut off by the monster. In the last war, the caretaker lost 3 sons. After experiencing grief, Gigas withdrew from people, leaving to work as a volunteer at the mine. This sword is an heirloom of the Gigas family. Nero wakes